Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about what controls breathing. That is, what stimulates breathing. And we're going to look at some disorders of breathing as well. So let's get into it. So there are two main areas that are involved in the control of breathing. One is in the center, and that's the medulla oblongata or brain. And then there's one on the periphery, and that's the aorta and the carotids. And what these areas have in common is that they have special receptors called chemoreceptors. These chemoreceptors are going to detect changes in blood. The central chemoreceptors are going to sense changes in CO2 and pH. If there's an increase in CO2, we call that hypercapnia, or if there's a decrease in pH, which is also an increase in CO2, those will both stimulate ventilation. Remember, CO2 is acidic. So more CO2 in the blood will lead to a more acidic state, and that's sensed by the central chemoreceptors and it stimulates breathing. The peripheral chemoreceptors, particularly the ones in the carotids, are going to sense a decrease in arterial oxygen. And we call that hypoxic drive. So if there's decreased oxygen, that's going to stimulate ventilation. Now, with hypercapnia, the increase in CO2, that's the primary signal for breathing. With the hypoxic drive, remember, we have plenty of oxygen in our reserves. We only have a limited amount of carbon dioxide. So if we're breathing in oxygen, we're also breathing out carbon dioxide. So the increase in carbon dioxide is the main stimulus for breathing. With prolonged hypercapnia, though, like in COPD, for example, the central chemoreceptors become less sensitive to hypercapnia, but they become more sensitive to hypoxia. So even though the stimulus for breathing is an increase in carbon dioxide, in COPD, because the lungs aren't working well, the patient is hypoxemic, and so that hypoxemia becomes the primary signal for respiration. In addition to the lung conditions like COPD, you can also have central nervous system disorders where there is a lesion in the area that controls breathing. And in that case, the person may not have the hypoxic drive. So in both of these cases, the patient is going to be hypercapnic because they're not ventilating well. But in COPD, it's because the lungs are not working well. In central nervous system disorders, it's because the brainstem is not stimulating the muscles of respiration to breathe effectively. Another thing that can happen is that you can have a condition called CO2 narcosis. That's where you have such high levels of carbon dioxide that it actually depresses the central nervous system. You can imagine that if you have too much carbon dioxide in the blood, it's going to make it more and more acidic. And if it's too acidic, that can actually slow down the rate of respiration. It can also decrease the drive to breathe. So it can become this vicious cycle. Alright, that's what stimulates breathing. If you want to review other concepts related to respiration, you can click on this playlist right here.